In our last video, we talked about the Brazilian hyperinflation and the clever device Brazilian economists used to overcome this problem, the URV. This is a fascinating case, and it illustrates the problem of inflation and hyperinflation in a really unique way. So we wanted to expand a bit on the case to explain exactly why expectations matter, and how grounding these expectations in something tangible is essential for how expectations are formed. But first, we must explain what is the problem with expectations in the first place. I mean, not the problem exactly, but the way expectations, through the way they are formed, can affect real economic outcomes today, even if they are about the future. Suppose that you expect that the dollar is going to become expensive tomorrow, and thinking this, you want to profit. In that case, the best thing to do is to buy dollars today, since they are cheap with respect to your domestic currency. If everyone else thinks like you, that is, everyone agrees that you are right, everyone else will do the same. What does that mean? Well, if everyone buys dollars today, the demand for dollars will increase, and assuming the supply of dollars is not increasing, this will make the dollar expensive today. You can argue and say, hey, if everyone all of a sudden wants dollars, wouldn't the supply increase? Not if everyone else thinks the same as you, because everyone expects the dollar to become expensive tomorrow. So in a weird, self-fulfilling prophecy kind of way, us thinking that the dollar will become expensive tomorrow makes the dollar expensive today. It's a weird concept, but expectations about the future trajectory of the dollar have an impact on the price of the dollar today, because people tend to act on their beliefs. So in summary, what people think about the future tends to have an impact on today, because people take actions today to cover whatever risks the future may bring. What does this have to do with inflation? Suppose that you have a nice pear orchard. You live in this orchard with your wife, 8 children, and 2 yellow labs, the AI-generated life that we imagine when we think of orchards. Your pears will grow at the end of the year, and you need to sell them. You usually sell them to supermarkets, but you don't wait until the end of the year to sell. You sign a contract with the supermarket at the beginning of the year, setting a quantity and price. But how much should you price the pears? If you believe there will be no inflation, then you just give the supermarket a price that makes you happy, given the price that the orchard next door is charging. That evil orchard next door that has Dobermans instead of labs. If you expect some inflation, then you have to think about how much that inflation is going to be. If you think this is a nice country with a nice central bank full of good people that act like adults, you look at the past with its low inflation rates of 2% and assume this will continue, so you charge your price plus 2%. Since the central bank is so nice and everything, everyone else thinks like this and increases prices by 2%. Guess what inflation is going to be at the end of the year? Now suppose you're in Zimbabwe. Last year's inflation was 500%. What should you charge? Prices plus what? It could be that inflation this year is 1,000% or 600%. Who knows? It depends on whether Mugabe needs more money for his crazy schemes. Can you get in his head? Nobody can, not even his wife. So to cover yourself, you just make the contract assuming 1,000% inflation, and you just tell the supermarket, here is the price, you figure it out. Now, if everyone thinks like you, guess what? Inflation this year is going to be 1,000%, because we all think so. This is how we end up with our expectations becoming reality. But it matters what we think of our central bank. If we all think the central bank is not that crazy, then we choose to charge 600% rather than 1,000%. Less crazy seems to be a bit of a misnomer here. Why does this matter today? Well, your workers and suppliers aren't different from you. Even if they don't have dogs, they also will increase their prices. So if you guess wrong on the lower end and they guess right on the upper end, you'll end up losing money. It's a risky proposition, especially if, based on past experience, the central bank is high on printing fumes. Well, the central bank was finally under control of reasonable people, but the rest of the population was sceptical. Could you blame them? They had seen upwards of 2,500% inflation. Why would you trust a new batch of people saying, "We super duper swear, it's going to be different this time. So they kept their expectations high, and as we saw above, that meant that inflation kept on being high. The thought here, from the economist's point of view, was, hey, what if everyone could index their future prices to inflation? Like, what if every contract was indexed to inflation? What would this do? Well, it would mean that people didn't have to guess anymore, and expectations are more in line with reality than with what people have in their heads, because the last central bank governor had a fetish for printing presses. But people don't work like that. Imagine walking into your favourite pastry shop and telling them, I will buy that Danish at $2 plus inflation tomorrow. They'd laugh at you because they haven't watched our videos. So those clever Brazilian economists figured out a way to make it easy for people to index everything to inflation. They made up a currency that was just an inflation index. Clever, right? It gave people an easy way to say to their donut supplier, I'll pay you in UVR, which means I will pay you the general inflation rate. The UVR doesn't exist, but it does index inflation, so that you can pay in reals but including the inflation rate. Given that no one had to guess, and this is super important, given that the central bank had stopped the printing presses, inflation went down, as desired. Remember, people learn slowly. In the first year when they index by the UVR, they might even be surprised. They would have guessed a high inflation rate, but when the central bank acts like an adult, it's actually pretty low. In conclusion, this method is unnecessary in countries where 10% inflation is considered a calamity, like the US, Canada, or the EU, or where most contracts are indexed to inflation anyway. But in countries like Brazil and Chile, where this clever imaginary currency was invented in the first place, it is sometimes necessary because it makes indexing for everything possible, taking away the need for guessing by people. Remember, forming expectations is very important here, and instead of indexing, some central banks use forward guidance for forming expectations. But this depends very much on what people think of them, or their reputation. These are two crucial concepts that we'll talk about in our next two videos. Stay tuned, money enthusiasts.